We're here with Mr. Mark Valentine. He has an incredible story to tell. Mark, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Valentine, and I live here in Sarasota, Florida. I'm retired, and I've had quite an experience in the spiritual realm. I had many years of a career in the environmental engineering field. Went to university for a couple of degrees in that field. I graduated back in the 70s. During the environmental movement, the first Earth Day was 1970, so I was inspired to do that as a career. So I spent maybe 4 decades of my life doing that work and raising a family. I have 2 daughters, grown, and then we have 3 grandchildren. So we're worldly, and we've had quite of a life of experience. I'm very lucky to have the family that I've had and that I do have, and everybody's well and doing well.
So you are what would be called a medium, is that correct? Or do you have a different term?
You know what? No one's asked me that before. A medium's a pretty broad.
Right. It's in the kind of global
I would say
psyche.
A channeler is a term that's used, term of art. And channeling there's a lot of different styles, a lot of different types of channeling. And not that I've experienced a lot of different types, I've only experienced what I have, but there's something called trance channeling or deep trance channeling, where a person is letting the being come into their mind and body, and they are not aware of that experience, and they're kind of resting in a certain place in their own spirit where they're not aware of what's the dialogue. With my experience, I would call it a light experience where I'm totally conscious, I'm totally listening, and over the years, and this has been almost 15 years in the making, so this didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't like all fun and games. It was serious work. It was hard spiritual work. At times it was even traumatic. Learn, because it's a major adjustment. It's like somebody else begins to live in your head, right?
It's not like something you chose to pursue. Like, oh, I'm going to get into channeling or something. It's something that happens.
Yeah, I didn't like follow people, follow ideas, go to channeling teachers or whatever. It literally just happened to me because I was all about my career in engineering, and I was in the latter stages of my career, and I thought that was my life until this literally showed up in the I'd say in the mid 2000s. I began to have, for lack of a better term, psychic experiences, telepathy, dreams, but I also had sleepless nights, many of those, elevated feelings, elevated feelings, borderline mania feelings. And it was traumatic to me. I was both having this spiritual awareness and awakening. At the same time, my body was trying to catch up with it, right? It's like, I call it struck by lightning, where your mind is trying to understand what's happening to you, and your body's trying to adjust to the feeling of what's happening to you. And so it was traumatic in my job. It created stress because, not that I was channeling at work, but it affected my overall, let's say, my overall well-being. And it's like somebody turned on another part of your brain where you had this one-dimensional functioning, and all of a sudden you had to learn to use both sides of your brain in a different way. One that does, I'll call it your everyday brain that goes about your life, and that really hasn't changed. I'm really blessed to have the life that I've had, and I'm retired, and like I said, we're all doing well. So, but on the other hand, learning to use that other muscle, let's just call it the channeling muscle, and it came upon me literally and pretty dramatically in 2009, and then it went to a whole different level, and my life has never been the same.
Just to help put it in context for me, when you said psychic experiences, and when I hear that word, I think of kind of fortune tellers and or maybe like TV shows that you've seen that are like, I know you're from Illinois, or you know, like kind of parlor trick kind of thing.
I'm glad you asked that question because that's not my experience at all. First of all, I don't see things, visual things. I don't see spirits. I don't see people call auras the spirit around somebody. I don't see any of that. So nothing visual. For me, it's all about telepathy and hearing. I don't hear voices as much as the term they use is seeing thoughts. When you're thinking, right? When you're in your thinking mind, you're thinking about whatever during the day. It's not like you're hearing those words in your mind. You're thinking those words in your mind. So when I'm experiencing the telepathy, I'm not hearing the words, but the words are speaking as thoughts, and I'm seeing those thoughts, but I'm seeing those thoughts in a way that I'm not seeing them and then speaking them. I'm seeing them as I am speaking them. Almost like your brain is multitasking. Part of your brain is doing the dialogue and the speaking, and the other part is listening and saying, does this make sense? You know, just like you would be sitting in a chair, imagine a third chair that I would be sitting in, listening to myself.
It's like I'm listening to you speak. You're also observing the voice.
And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, if I feel like, you know, I don't want to do this any longer, it's not making sense, or I don't feel connected, then, you know, I would stop. On the other hand, if I was really connected, listening to the dialogue, and all of a sudden I began to think, you know, it's one thing to listen passively. It's another thing to listen, let's just call it active listening, where you're thinking about it too much. Because if my thinking part of my mind engages too much, then you're not neutral, right? You're no longer neutral. Your thoughts are and sometimes I'll think something and then all of a sudden it shows up in the channeling. So it's a nuanced thing. It's really an art. Channeling is an art. You have to learn to listen in a certain way, and listening in a way that you have to like surrender your concept of who you are, what the world should be, and whatever's channeling through you, be willing to hear that story. And you have to ask yourself, is that story good for me? And is that story good for my friends and family? And is that story good for the world? And my experience, I would call it a world story. A story about human nature, a story about who created who, how we got here. And more specifically, the work is called Teaching Love in the Way of Soul. And so my experience is literally a soul encounter where back in 2007, 8, and 9, my soul actually engaged my mind actively. My mind immediately rejected that because this is not normal. This is not me. Something's happening to me and I don't know what it is. So my mind really went into, like I said, struck by lightning. And then over the years, it's almost like it pulsed, and my mind became very active in the experience. And then, like I said, I was hospitalized because of it, because I couldn't adapt to it. It affected me, it affected my family, it affected my work. And I was hospitalized for a week. And then, but I moved, as the years went on, whatever that pulse was, I began to assimilate it and integrate it into my life. And the channeling began to be, first it was a lot of telepathy and intense dreams. And then after the late 2000s, and then it just I began to integrate it in my life year by year.
Kind of acclimate yourself to the process.
And I had to be in counseling. I mean, I've been in counseling for the better part of 10 years.
When it first started, did you have your own explanation for what was going on, or did the healthcare providers kind of give you some insight of what might be happening? Or
no, I remember talking to my doctor when I was hospitalized, and basically they think you're losing your mind, right? Because you're not normal in the sense of normal,
and you probably have some feelings of anxiety because of the strange things that are happening to you. So you combine that with something that is not commonplace for most people, and then a little bit of anxiety in your part going into it. I could see how they could look at that as something like, oh, okay, but now talking to you, you know, you didn't even mention it to me until after a few times interacting, and it kind of came up naturally, but because of the content that I helped you with. But it's not something like I've met other people as well that have said they are mediums, and it's a little bit more on the front page of what they kind of like actually. The lady that we bought, that used to own the house we were in, I saw her drive by, and she was in a black Camaro, and it had her name in pink bubble letters on the side. And when I chatted with her, I was wondering why she was driving by, and she was she had some grief on what had happened with the house going to the kids, and the kids lost it. And she assured me, she said there was some bad spirits in here, but she said they're gone now. But with someone like her, it's on the front page. But with you, it was something that you didn't, it's not like, hey, by the way, I'm a medium.
Right.
You know?
Well, again, I wouldn't call myself a medium in the first place. Or channeler. But I had so much trauma in the beginning with trying, you know, I thought, you know, whatever was happening to me was a good thing, and I shared it with some of my friends. Nobody had a clue what was happening to me, and that part was traumatic. And so basically that taught me an important lesson is that let it be what it is for you, and then when you begin to understand it better, and when you think it can begin to be understood by somebody else, then you can begin to share it. But that took a lot of mental processing, like I said, in counseling for the better part of 10 years, and working on it and trying to integrate it. But to make a long story short, no, I'm not out there with it. I keep it very private, and I don't even share a lot with my wife. First of all, she knows it's my experience. She's accepting of it, and she sees that I'm functional. I'm still a good husband.
Right.
I'm still the Mark that she always knew. But yet there was this other part of me, and yet she knew back, you know, years ago that I had, you know, it became, I couldn't manage it. So that's in the back of her mind then, is Mark going to be okay? But over the years, she became more and more relaxed that Mark is okay. But yet, you know, I think the way I like to say it is she didn't think I was crazy, but in some view, she could say, he's having a crazy experience, meaning I don't understand it.
Right, yeah, because it's not commonplace.
It's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not normal.
No, I saw your conversations you had with Deb Shakti, and she is a channeler as well. And how does from your sharing your experience, her sharing her experience with you, how does is the experience different for different channelers, or is there a similarity of experience?
I think it's all different, and I have to make a confession that I don't really follow other channelers. I don't really want to inject a bias as to what my experience should be, and so. And way back, you know, I've certainly seen them here and there and listened to them here and there, but not much. It's never been a passion to pursue that.
Because it wasn't in the first place for you. You, it came to you.
It found me as opposed to me finding it.
Right.
But Deb's, I saw, she was in a movie actually, and in her movie, it helped. She was functioning as a healer, so to speak. She's also a channeler, but mainly working people with their own bodies and their own experience, helping them to process it. I think she calls herself a quantum hypnotherapist, but helping people to go into experiences, a lot of them going back to childhood, and helping them to process that and not be afraid of it. Because in this field, or we'll call it a field, or in this area, that most of the people, a lot of people have had traumatic experiences. We'll call them psychic, spiritual, or other, and most people don't want to share them.
Right.
And there's something called, that I have worked in a little bit, it's called the experiencer group. People that have had experiences, all different kinds. Near-death experiences, crazy dream experiences, telepathic experiences, things they saw. And everybody brings their own unique experience. And the whole idea is you have people that are going to listen to you and not judge you for what, and not say you're crazy. You just had something very unusual that most people can't relate to.
And I think anybody can relate to that, because especially growing up in your kind of formative years and adolescence, you kind of want to fit in. So when you have something that comes to you that makes you different, you kind of like, I kind of just would like to be normal or quote unquote normal. But I think as you get older, you realize that everybody is kind of on a spectrum of experience, and not everybody's got a unique experience and has gone through things that are very personal to them and specific to them. And so for you to have this experience, it's something that I think is in the kind of global social psyche. When you hear some, like, it's always like the mystics and something in that realm. So it's not a uncommon thing that you heard of, but you don't know many people that have gone quite through that experience. So for me, I told you before that I had what I think I saw a ghost of what I believe is my great-grandmother when I was staying at my great-aunt's house. And as a kid, I was probably 10 years old or so, and I was staying in her bedroom. It was an extra bedroom, and it was as it was when she was alive. And in that room, pink carpet, pink bed sheets, pink wallpaper, pink cushions on the rock, everything was pink. So it was a little, it was not like a standard room to begin with. And so when I was sleeping that night, I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just as you might, and then seeing what I thought was just my living grandmother at the foot of my bed. And as I'm looking at her, kind of getting my bearings, I remember seeing her, and it kind of looked, there was some moonlight coming in the window that overlooked the lake, and she looked like she was wearing a white kind of nightgown at that time. And I remember looking at her and then kind of eventually getting confused, like, that's not grandma. And then I remember getting very cold, and then I remember just trying to be as still as possible once I got a little startled by it. And then I remember closing my eyes and then opening them and then closing and then waiting for whatever it was to change or go away. And then I then opened my eyes again. I saw the figure drifting towards the window as to kind of like look out the window. And then by that time, I would say I was very kind of terrified because I couldn't explain it in my own mind. And then I closed my eyes, and then I woke up, or not woke up, but then opened them again, and then the figure was gone. So I thought it was my cousin or playing a trick on me or something. And to this day, I always think back and go, I'm open-minded to whatever it could have been or could not have been. I realize that for me, maybe it was just a very vivid dream or something, but the things that stand out to me that differed from my normal dream experiences was I felt very cold, and my feet felt very cold. And I remember, like I said, closing my eyes and then opening, and then in my dreams, I don't recall ever closing my eyes in a dream. You're just kind of there. And so whatever it was a unique experience to me. I couldn't have a conversation with that entity or whatever it was. So it's about as far as I could go with it. But do you have experiences like that, or what would you say happened to me in that point?
Well, first of all, I have many dream experiences about relatives that have passed on. Like I said before, I don't see them visually when I wake up, but I experience them in my body. And to me, it's a common experience. Oftentimes, I think they're here to say, I want you to know that I live on. I want you to know that I'm okay. And I want you to know that I'm here with you. And I want you to know we're helping you with your life, doing whatever you're doing, like a spirit guide, like your ancestors. I believe that we go through life as a family, but even in the afterlife, I believe those family ties are still there. And just as we help each other in this level, that they are integrated to some extent, helping us to get through our life and then moving on to the next life.
It's kind of like in the Star Wars movie, where at least from my personal experience, my dad passed away a few years ago, and when he passed away, I had a connection with him that was in some ways deeper than when he was here, because he felt with me for a great while after his passing, and it kind of reminded me of like the Jedi ghost kind of feeling, where it was comforting, and like you said, he was still with me, still teaching me. I was still reminded of like things he would say, or
it's like a part of you is living on,
right,
as a part of him is living on in your own family experience, right?
And you had mentioned you had a couple relatives that had passed away. Your father.
Well, first, I've lost both of my parents. I'm in my 70s, and they lived. My dad lived to be 90. My mom lived to be 92, and they were great. We had a very loving family. They had a great life together. They were married, I think, 70 years. So, but when in 2017, my dad had been a long illness, and he was getting close to the end. And so they live in Missouri. So it was Thanksgiving. I went with my wife, and I went up to Missouri to visit them. I was there for a week, and he wasn't in good shape. And so when I left to fly back to Florida, I said goodbye to him, not knowing that I was going to see him again. And so that was on a Friday I said goodbye. On a Saturday I flew back, and then on a Sunday morning, right before I woke up, I had a long dream about my dad. And I don't remember ever, I'm sure I've had dreams about my dad, but I don't remember any of them. But so this was an uncommon situation. But in the dream, he was showing me the experience of heaven. He was with somebody, a friend of his that had passed on a couple years earlier. The two of them were together, and they were showing me these beautiful scenes, and we were together, and I just had this very loving feeling. And it was really a very comforting, like you said, very comforting, warm feeling about your dad, and showing me something about where he, but anyway, at that time of the dream, he was still alive. But 2 hours later, my sister called and said he passed away. So it's almost like first of all, he waited for me to see him, say goodbye to him before he went, right? And so it was part of that. My two sisters lived near him, so they were able to be close and say those, and to have their words with Dad, but he waited for me, and then once I did that, then he showed me that dream where he was going, and then he died. Wow. And then I've had other dreams about him. The other one I wanted to mention about my nephew Marcus, he died tragically in 2018 at the age, I think he was 47. He had a family, a beautiful family, and so a lot of trauma in the family when he died. And so I went back up to Missouri to spend time with my sister, his mom, to help her with the experience. And I was there for 2 weeks, funeral and all of that. So then I flew back again to Florida. And when I flew back, like 2 or 3 days after I'd gotten back, I was, again, this is 2018, I was waking up, and just as I was starting to wake up in that sleep state where you're not awake and you're not asleep, I think maybe there's a term hypnagogic or something like that in-between state. Anyway, I got a little bit of a jolt, and then in my body and in my mind, actually, I whispered these words softly, and the words were, "This is Marcus, and I want you to tell my mom that I am forgiven." It's almost like something that he needed to say for his transition, right? There's a part of him that knew that what he did was going to affect a lot of people, especially his two younger children, his mom, his dad, all of that. So I would say that's part of him letting go.
He wanted to let them know it's going to be okay for his sake.
Yeah, that he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And he wanted them to know that he's going to be okay.
Right.
But here's what's interesting. This is Marcus, I want you to tell my mom that I'm going to be okay. So I woke up, and I'm sure I called my sister and said, yeah, I had this dream about Marcus, or this experience with Marcus. And then 2 days later, 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, it's like somebody jolted my body, like they took your shoulder and they started shaking you. So I went from a dead sleep to being shaken awake. I won't say violently, but forcefully. And so I'm awake and, you're basically in a state of shock. He said the same thing again. This is Marcus. I want you to tell my mom that I'm going to be okay. And I said, trust me, I'm telling her. I'm telling her I got the message. But he added the exclamation mark to it.
Wow.
So I was really impressed by that. And I'll never forget it. So as my experience goes on, just as I mentioned, your ancestors and family that have passed on are somehow part of your life journey. I experience them in conscious, psychic, telepathic ways, dream ways that goes on for me. So I've had many dreams about relatives, but the one about my dad, I will never forget because he showed me where he's going. He showed me he's going to be okay, and he showed me he's going to be with me on my journey.
Was with what he shared with you, is his vision of heaven, is that his own, like, is that unique to him, or is that something that we could all look forward to?
Well, no, I think what my takeaway was that he's okay, he's happy. No, I think the vision they showed me in the dream, I've heard so many stories that, near-death experiences or people that have experienced dip their toe in the ocean, let's say. And the stories are altogether different. And I think if you put your toe in the ocean, do you really know the ocean? No, you know a sensation. So you might say, I put my toe in the ocean. And I believe these near-death experiencers, when the stories they tell, I believe their toe is in the ocean. I think the whole ocean experience is we're not capable of processing
right,
because we're here in the body.
Like the universe, like the universe within, it's just unfathomable, the scale and scope.
We're living in a life with what we call reality, and what I've heard other people use the term consensus reality. It's what, reality is not a hard and fast thing. Reality is almost like what, in a social conditioning sense, what we all agree reality is because we call it normal, because that's the behavior around us. But when somebody breaks that mold, then all of a sudden people say, well, what's going on? But over time, if you look back, a century, 2 centuries, whatever ago, reality, perception, consensus reality evolves. It's never hard and fast, staying like that all along. So, but what I'm learning in my own channeling experience, they talk about, in my channeling experience, it's called Teaching Love, the Way of Soul. And the idea is allowing you, or me in this case, to have a conscious experience with the soul. And the soul's experience at that level, it's connected. If you think of, I think of Jung, he called the psyche sometimes the collective unconscious. We dream in this sea of humanity. And when we open up into that collective unconscious, we're experiencing other input, other ideas, other connections that we can't experience in our singular mind. But in the way of soul, what I've learned is they say we have a mind that learns to believe what it calls reality, because it's always changing. But it calls me and us at this level believers. We come with a certain belief, and this says we're here because we believe in love, and the overall experience of life and on earth is all about love. It's really a love story, and playing out in different lives, in different ways, in different times in the world. But at the level of soul, they say they have that, what I call a superconscious. You could say not a collective, unconscious, a collective superconscious, where they have, let's just use the term all-knowing. And I don't have anything in my mind that I would call all-knowing, but they're teaching the idea that a soul has the ability to know, let's just say to know what reality really is. And what reality is a reality that doesn't change. It's not time dependent. It is a constant.
That was a concept that I heard, a very similar concept to that when I read this book given to me by my father, and it was called The Magus of Stravolos, and it was written by Mercius Mercatus, Chrysios Mercatus, and the book took place in Cyprus, and it followed this author followed a mystic, and in his experiences with this mystic, he described 3 kind of planes. I don't know if this is your experience, but you get the physical realm, you got kind of the dream realm, which is akin to the physical realm in the sense of you have dreams that you see familiar things from the physical realm, but obviously in a totally different experiences and different guidelines and different codes of conduct is totally wildly different. And then what I'm guessing you're explaining as the soul level is beyond that, and it goes beyond any sort of thing we could describe here in the physical realm and the dream realm. Is that what
I mean,
it is?
yeah, I mean that's a similar. I think a lot of people are telling the same story using different terminology.
Yeah.
And for example, what you were describing, there's the we'll call it the reality of the term they use in my experience, a mind of life. We're in our life. We each have our own mind, and through that mind, we see the world in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And then they talk, then the mind of life, but within a mind of life, there's something they just call the mind, and we'll call that the real mind that has the connection to the soul. And the soul level, well, let me go back to what you were saying. I've heard the term the astral plane. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so maybe, let's just call it an in-between plane, mm-hmm. between this world and a world beyond. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. So I'm thinking that the astral is where we go and sleep. There's people that do sleep studies, mm-hmm. and there's even spirituality schools that study the idea of sleep learning, right? You go have experiences in the sleep realm, and you learn about lucid dreaming, and then you bring that experience back, and it helps you grow more mm-hmm. consciously. Mm-hmm. And by the way, when I'm just thinking, you asked me what did the doctors say when I showed up in the hospital. I remember talking to them, and I was still having the experience. I mean, it didn't stop, mm-hmm. but I was basically there to get help mm-hmm. with the emotions, right? Mm. There's the psychic experience, and then there's the emotions in the body of how you process that.
And it still made sense to have a healthcare provider guide you with that part of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I totally needed it because mm-hmm. like I would take off and with my dog, we'd go driving around, and I would be gone a long time just in my own experience, and that was upsetting to my wife. She didn't know where I was.
Right.
And so yeah, I definitely needed help and I needed attention. But what's funny is that when I was having that experience, the telepathic part said, tell them you're having expanded awareness, which was exactly what
a hard sell in the moment.
Yeah, a hard sell, and they says, well, we have other medical terminology for that. We've got medicine for that.
Yeah.
And so that I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
But it's truly what it was. We have a certain awareness in the world, and we use that to live in the world and do what we do. But when you have something like this, your world vision expands horizontally and vertically. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. it just becomes expanded awareness.
Now, there's been a kind of more medical adopting of various hallucinogens in this day and age, yeah. Mushrooms and things like ayahuasca. How do you feel about that? Is that a legitimate portal into seeing things in a different way if you treat it with respect and things, or is this?
By the way, first of all, I'd be naive to say I know anything. I haven't done it. Mm-hmm. But the stories I've read, and for example, in 60 Minutes, they gave, and I might have been LSD mm-hmm. or some kind of hallucinogen to people that have severe depression or severe addiction. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a last resort. I think it's at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And they were using that. They gave them the hallucinogen. The person was there with them, watching them, and helping them through it. But it had some medical benefit to mm-hmm. the person. So mm-hmm. But yet I've heard, and I've had
horror stories.
no, I really haven't heard. I'm sure there are out there, but I've heard a lot of stories where people said it wasn't easy, but it was life-changing.
Right.
In other words, they saw things, but then you have to see parts of yourself that maybe you didn't want to see, but they're there, and you become suddenly conscious of them.
Mm-hmm.
Things that were maybe limiting or holding you back. So, but overall, I really can't comment
speak on that,
other than what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so,
And by the way,
yeah.
I don't think I would ever do that. Given what I'm having, what I've experienced, first of all, I don't know what I would. Of course, maybe I would get something out of it, but given my situation, I don't think it would be a good thing for me.
Wouldn't be added. So too much responsibility at that point.
Well, yeah. I would be worried if I did that. I would be worried.
Mm-hmm. And so, going back to your family, and how does this skill that you've acquired, how does this affect you with your relationships now with your family? You mentioned that your immediate family has kind of like accepted you for this, but does that have some plus benefits that you were able to get some insights to help with interpersonal relationships or things going on with your family?
Well, I would say, as far as my family, since we're retired and our kids are out of the nest, that it's really my relationship with my wife. First of all, these strange things would happen. She didn't understand. Then she saw me getting medical help. And then she saw all the work I was doing in counseling over the years. And slowly, she began.
Yeah, you weren't resisting to getting some assistance with what you were going through.
Well, yeah, and I wanted to be realistic that people don't understand what's happening to you. And I don't understand what's happening to me. But nonetheless, you have to go about your daily life. And I was doing that. I'd still watch sports. I watch football. I watch hockey. I'm still living a life, right? I'm still doing what I do and what I enjoy. But yet, there's this other skill set that needs attention.
You hadn't gotten any gambling tips on watching the game or anything like that?
Again, that's not my. I would say my psychic experience is all about telling a story about the relationship between ourself, our life, our mind, and our soul. And it's all about love. That's in my experience, it's all about learning that we're created to be loved, to experience love, and to learn to accept love in other people, and ultimately not to judge that we've got a better handle on love than the next person. And I often think that if I was born in a different country, different setting, different family, what would I be like? Because people that come from that I might say, that's a bad person. How do I know what I would have turned out to be if I started out in that surrounding?
The concept of love, and I hear it also used as a synonym to like light and love. Do you get that imagery when you think of love? You hear that a lot.
Well, there's two kinds of love, and I think the love that most people talk about, I would call it the feeling sensation, the heart sensation of love, how we experience love in the body. But love in the mind, I think, transcends the idea of how we experience love in the body, because with our blinders on, we'll say, well, that's love, but that's not love over there, right? What they're doing, that's not loving and that's not love. But in the greater context, where we're all in this together, and we're learning individually and we're learning collectively, they would simply say, take your blinders off and look at the big picture. In the big context of things, it's all love. But our mind breaks it down in our own limited view of reality. We say, this is how things are. We have a consensus view of it, and that is not love. So, and we have to function in the world. I'm not saying bad behavior should be, condoned or loved or anything like that. We still have to have a social complex where we come together and we have rules how we can live and sort of thing. So I'm not saying don't judge people, but what I'm learning is judge only if you have to, I guess. But
with an open mind.
With an open mind and compassion that, do you know their life story? Do you know where they came from? And do you know whether if you were born into that situation, surrounded by those people in that setting, how would you be? And so I think in my experience, I've learned a lot about compassion.
How would you put the idea of love in the context of what we know as the common religions, things like that? When you think of, you hear the term, in various religions, is that just a common kind of thing? Is that relate into? Is that the same thing when you think about it?
Well, when I think of love and religion, I kind of cringe a little bit because it's got an intellect story laid over that, right? It's looking through it through a certain filter, which is how certain people believed, how they experienced the lives of spiritual teaching, Buddha, Christ, or Muhammad, or whatever the teacher is. That forms a worldview, and then they learn to function in that worldview and find love in that setting. But it doesn't mean the worldview love in the setting of Buddhist or Islamist would be better or in any way different than the Christian view of love, or somebody who doesn't have a religion at all.
Right.
They may be having, I look at it as love in a pure sense of the heart, and I don't think of love in the context of necessarily as a religious thing.
Right.
Religious thing is, again, a consensus view of how things were and how things should be, and apply that to love. I believe love more unconditionally, more existentially, and more universally.
Yeah, I think I have that kind of belief too. Like you call it what you want, spirituality or whatever, but it's like your own guiding light. For me, at least, it's you kind of have your own. It's your own expression to follow that energy or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, to help guide you, give you a sense of faith, and so that's how I kind of see. I kind of, maybe just from my own personal physical world experience, have you kind of pull. I don't know if you could relate to me in that sense. Maybe prior to your acquiring your skill, that I kind of pulled from different things I've experienced and said, well, and I've shaped my own kind of spirituality in that way. And I think what I have come up with is, when these concepts like of Jesus was this kind of figure, that something you kind of aim to as a role model, in a sense, where you go, he's got a lot of good attributes. He's compassionate, loving, and things like that. But at the core of it, it goes beyond that, for me at least, where I'm thinking of, like you were saying, you may have done something quote unquote bad, but it's guiding your experience to, as you move down towards your path of experiences, to help maybe make you a better person. Like you may have had a bad experience, but then now with that bad experience, you can either relate to people that have also had that bad experience and help them through that, and help be of help be there for other people in life to go through certain experiences.
And by the way, when you mention religion, I'm thinking about, I've dreamt a lot about spiritual figures and well-known spiritual figures, as well as a lot of other well-known people. But in the spiritual realm, I'm thinking, you mentioned Jesus. I've had a couple dreams about Jesus, and again, an overwhelming sense of love. One of the dreams, I was back in the times of the early Christians, back in the time of Jesus, I'll just say it that way. And I was sitting in like an amphitheater, maybe like a Roman amphitheater, and I looked down beyond the arena, and on the other side there was a white tent, and I could see somebody in a a light brown garb, and teaching people, around him, talking to them. And then I looked in the dream, I looked at the person next to me, and I said, "That's Jesus of Nazareth. That's Jesus of Nazareth." And I had this overwhelming sense of love. Now, and another dream I've had several dreams about the Dalai Lama. And
the current one.
Yeah. I think it's the 14th, I believe. And in the first dream, I was in Tibet, and we were up in the mountains. It was a spiritual experience. Up in the mountains, but we were potting plants together. We were doing the simplest thing, but I was with the Dalai Lama, and I had again the same feeling, an overwhelming feeling of love. And and another dream, I was in like where he lives, and there was some kind of a dinner, and that a funny dream I had. I was in a dentist office, and I was in a dentist chair, and the Dalai Lama was having dental work in the chair next to me. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
But again, and then another spiritual figure, John Paul II. I've had several dreams about him. One being in the Vatican, he came over, said something to me. Another one, we were looking at a newspaper together, and just some weird stuff. But in each of those experiences, coming together, overwhelming sense, a deep sense of love, and reverence, and also humility. That I'm aware that part of me is aware that these people are religious leaders, spiritual leaders, and why am I here in this setting? And yet in that context of these well-known people dreams I've had, it's teaching me something at the level of soul. There is nobody that's more well-known than somebody else. We're all well-known,
right.
and we're all equally well-known. We're all equally connected. So it wouldn't be unusual, because we think we're changed in status, time, distance, space and time, basically. In that realm of soul, they're teaching me that we're all connected, and nobody is more special than anybody else.
Would that include a figure like Jesus? Was he just a guy that kind of was living his best life, and humanity has then worshipped him? Because wasn't his thing like, don't idolize anything. Like, you could idolize God, but don't idolize.
Well, a lot of religions look at him slightly differently, but I just look at Jesus as pure love, and that's how I experience it. And
that's probably how he would want to be thought of.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's how I experience. Yeah. So anyway, but you asked about religions and how they should. All I can, in a personal way, in the dream context, and also, do I admire the Dalai Lama? I like the Dalai Lama's simple, plain folks talking, right? He makes it like he can really. He's what I would call the everyman teacher. It's not intellectual. It's on our level of understanding. So I really like that about him, and. Yeah.
Before your experience, what were your ideas of religion? Were you religious in any way, or
not really? I was raised Methodist and went to church every Sunday, Sunday school, all of that. Then I remember when I went to college at university, I got away from that, and then in my 20s, I became, I'll just say, disenchanted or depressed, or like asking myself, well, what is this all for? What is this about? So when I went to church when I was growing up, it was something I did, something that I enjoyed in some respects, but in some other respects, it didn't satisfy a deeper yearning to connect with something deep within myself. And so in my 20s, a lot of problems with depression, and felt lost. I went to school, I got 2 degrees in engineering, and then I was doing my engineering career, and somehow it says, this is not everything for me. There's something else. And again, that's deep, something deep within me knew what was coming, and you could say. And so I remember having problems with headaches and sleeplessness. I go to see my doctor multiple times, and back in the day, he says, well, take this, I think it was Valium back in the day, and that is not good stuff.
Right.
So, it shuts your dreams down, and it wasn't good. And then so eventually he says, well, I can't help you. So he says, but my wife teaches meditation. Go see her. So that's when I began to make that inside connection, right? Meditating and experiencing that energy, that love, that deep yearning that I had myself. I would say that's the first time I began to connect with that. And that's the first time I said, I want to follow that, wherever that takes me. So it's like connecting with something deep within your heart and said, okay, show me what to do. Show me my life. Show me my best self.
And you're actively pursuing that. I've done some meditating, probably not as much as I should, but you realize that the meditating is work. It's not like you just lay on the ground and close your eyes. That's just resting.
Yeah.
But when you really pursue meditating that way, it's you got to show up to do it, and it's
I think
active.
showing up is the most important thing, because put yourself, in a chair, on a couch, whatever's comfortable for the body, and give it that time and space. And most importantly, your thoughts start showing up consciously. And in meditation, you've got to learn to look at the thought, not hang on to the thought. But if you need to hang on to it for, day, week, or month, then hang on to it, but just noticing it and not judging it, and more importantly, not saying that's who you really are. In a deeper sense, that's what you're having those thoughts, but you are not, in the truest sense, you are not those thoughts. Eckhart Tolle, who wrote The Power of Now, basically said we're not our thoughts. Our thoughts are what we think about, what we do in our life. We need them, obviously, but in the truer sense, in the deepest reality, we're something deeper than that, more than that. So, but yeah, I've done a lot of meditation, and I went for maybe 10 years of meditating, and sometimes really deeply, an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And it felt transcendental in that I felt my energy shifting and awareness. And again, the telepathic part of it was very much part of that. But then within maybe a couple years ago, as I was becoming more actively involved in the channeling, I just didn't have those deep meditational experiences. Maybe they'll come back. But again, it was part of my transformation. And I still think it's a valuable and important, and in some respects, a necessary part of life, because you need to sit with yourself, and you need to kind of let go.
Be comfortable with
Let go and be comfortable in your own skin, but really learning that the thoughts you're having and the way you see yourself is only a limited view of who you really are. So when you do the meditation and you give your mind a break, then something deeper within you can begin to connect with you, or you can begin to connect with it, because it's always there. And the question is, how connected are you at any point in time?
Not to switch gears totally too much, but I wanted to touch on what your thoughts of, say, UFOs or aliens. We've had a lot of videos lately and like releases and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of stuff?
Well, first of all, I'm totally into the topic, right? I've never seen one, but I've heard so many stories about people that have. And I mentioned there's this group called the Experiencer Group, and they bring all kinds of experience, including people that have seen them and experienced them in certain ways. But I did have one dream. I had a couple of dream experiences related to let's just call it the ET idea. In one of the dreams, well, first of all, in one of the dreams, and this happened back in the 70s when I was beginning to have that spiritual awakening I was talking about. I was lost. I was living in Kansas City, but in the dream, I was in Florida, where I am today. And when I was in Florida, I was lost, like couldn't make sense of things, couldn't find where I'm at, much like a process that I went through in the last couple decades, trying to sort things out. Anyway, so I looked up. I felt it was Miami, but could have been anywhere in Florida. I looked up. It was dark night, dead of night. Looked up. Stars were shining bright, and then just like I experienced voices in my head or thoughts in my head, a thought came into my head. It said, "Follow Sirius if you want to get home." So I woke up, and said, whoa, what is that about? And I still don't know. Well, I've had some experiences that gives me a hint of that, but I do think, I think it's a naive thought to just think we are in this world and that's all there is. All that creation, that universe is out there. To me, it's almost an arrogant thought to think we're alone. So I think in the human experience, we all have an innate sense to want to connect. We're a social being. And that innate sense of connection in a grand scale is that we have to ask ourselves, this is not all there is to it. And so, yeah.
It's more fun to live in a reality that has an open door to the idea of UFOs and aliens, and even people like you. I'd rather you be here than that. Why would I shut down the idea of what you do? Because it's just amazing that there's people in this world that have experiences even like you do. Yeah. And then when you think about everything else, it's like I like the idea of limitless possibilities in one's experience. So yeah. It's great. Now,
but let me just make one other comment about UFOs. But in my experience is really all about connecting with your soul. But on that soul connection, where we're learning more and more about how to realize that we're not just I'll say an individual or person, we are a soul. Mm-hmm. Like my true name might be the soul of Mark. Mm. And I said, well, I'm just Mark. But in this context of what I'm learning, I'm not really I am the idea of an individual life calling itself Mark, but that's not my true identity. My true identity is my soul identity. Mm. And so, but in my soul identity, which we are learning to experience at some level, but at the level of, we'll just call it the ET level or the universal level, there is an evolution in consciousness where they are fully aware, fully conscious of their soul, not thinking of themselves as an individual, as a life, having a certain experience, but on the soul level, having knowledge of, let's just say, the bigger picture or the ultimate reality. So the star people or the ETs, let's just say, in a certain context, what we could imagine is they have that soul consciousness, and we are learning that soul consciousness.
They're tapped into it.
Yeah.
So you were describing the concept. There's like the Mark soul, but then there's the soul level soul. So the souls upon souls, or is it the same soul? Or
well, again, I will say I'm very much on a learning curve on that. But mm-hmm. We are each created in a soul. Creates our mind. Here's the lineage. Based on the teaching, they call something a creator soul at that level, which is more of a world level, creates individual souls. Mm. And the individual souls create individual minds. And an individual mind creates an individual life, which has its own mind, its own way of seeing the world. So they would call the individual life the mind of life. And what we call our life, they would call our life story. Mm. So you go the creator soul, the mind of life, and then the life story. Mm. And what we call our life, they would call the life story. Mm-hmm. And we are all sharing a common story called life on earth, right? Mm-hmm. But then we all have an individual input to that story and call it our life, and they call it our story of our life. Mm. And they say the story of our, one thing they said we all share in common is we believe in the world. How do you know that? Well, you're in the world. We're here working. You believe in the world, but then said more importantly, love is really the binding principle in the world. So they say we come here because we believe in love, and love is on a grand stage, right? And we're all playing a part in a love story called Life on Earth. Mm. And so, yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. And I was wondering if you are getting a little tingling in your ear of a soul that wants to do some speaking on your behalf, or
well, it's funny you say that because I'm not getting that feeling sensation now, but I'm happy to do that. Mm. But oftentimes I will get these kind of, it's almost like a goosebump sensation mm-hmm. in my body, and mm-hmm. sometimes I call it a light bulb experience where my whole body starts sensing that. And in terms of my physical experience, yeah. I do get those readings, but yeah, I'm totally prepared to do that. And when I open up to that, I want to clarify that I'm not in I haven't gone anywhere. Mm-hmm. My mind is here sitting in a chair. Watching and listening, and hopefully not interrupting, right? Mm-hmm. Not interrupting. And sometimes, like I said, I'll start, and if I feel deeply connected, I'll continue. But there's times where I'll say, I don't feel like I'm connected, right. or connected there's different levels. When I experience channeling, there's we talked about the mind of life, which is kind of where we're at. Then you could call the real mind, then the real soul, and then the creator soul, and then even goes beyond that, and they call that all there is. And when I had my, what I call my channeling baptism, almost literally, I was in a hot tub in 2009, and I was still heavily involved in my engineering work. I was sitting there process. I was really busy working out, sorting out problems about work, and all of a sudden, all those thoughts got interrupted, and I go into this deep coughing spell. And I couldn't stop coughing. And then all of a sudden, I was coughing up words. I began to say words. And then that turned into, I began to speak. And that's really how the channeling really began. And and the okay. And in that experience, let's just say it went on for 30 minutes. Obviously, I didn't record it. Obviously, I can't have a clear recollection of it, other than it was an amazing feeling to see yourself sitting there talking, and see yourself sitting there listening to yourself talking, and knowing that's not me doing that. And all this, that was transformational. But at the end of that experience, I remember looking up into the stars. It was October 2009, and a voice in my head, thoughts in my head said, "I'm all there is." So at the fundamental driver of my experience, they just call it all there is. So how do we get our heads around that? We can't, right? We can't, obviously. But the teacher, the main teacher, calls itself the soul creator. And the soul creator says it lives on in all of us. So I would call it a common denominator presence that we all share. So we all came here out of a big bubble of love and creating this creative consciousness, and we all got a piece of that. We brought it into the world, and we learned how to reconnect it, you might say. We were all connected. We came in it, and then we created an idea that we're disconnected, but we live our lives learning how to be more connected. Yeah. So yeah, if you want, and by the way, if you want to have any conversation with the soul creator, for example, we can try that. I never know how that's going to go, because having a conversation is a little bit different, because my mind is listening to the question.
And mediating the conversation.
It's kind of a three-way conversation rather than a two-way conversation.
What is it? Okay.
But it's I call channeling an experiment. And I even consider myself as a prototype. And I know that's a weird thought to have, but back in 2009, when all those things were happening to me, I began to experience something called the Emily mind. And in that, I remember in the middle of the night, I was getting all these inner sensations. I go back into my back study, I lay down, and all of a sudden I get these waves of pulses of energy, just laying down, and it was like a light bulb turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off, and it was pulsing through me, and it became faster and faster and more rapid and more intense, to the point I remember looking around the room while this was happening. I thought something was going to manifest right in front of me, because the energy was so intense. So anyway, then I go to bed, I wake up in the morning, and there was a presence in my mind that was not there the day before. I was aware of another consciousness inside my head. And it called itself the Emily mind, and it's part of my experience, and I'm still learning to, let's say, relate to that, but it's part of the teaching. It's part of this teaching. So, yeah, and the term that they've used about my mind, it's abstracted. It's abstracted mind. It's almost like looking into a prism and all these different colors coming out of it. So my mind, through all of these years, and mainly through those transformational years from 2007 to 2009, it's almost like they rewired my mindset.
You feel better, like more.
Well,
like
no, it was traumatic.
I mean, but as of right now, like it's.
I'm fine right now.
It rewired it in a way that has given you better insight,
It just made me expanded awareness. Being aware of not just my life, but be aware of our collective life, and being aware of other consciousness at other levels, like the Emily mind, the soul creator, something that calls itself the soul of Sirius. But yet there's some part of my mind, if I'm channeling, at times it'll be me talking to myself. There's some part of me connected at this earth level that's also part of it. So it's multidimensional. All I can say, based on my experience, we are so much more than we can ever believe.
You feel like it's made you like like the traits like more compassionate and stuff like
More
that.
humble.
More humble,
More humble.
more thoughtful. Like one thing that I really I noticed when in our correspondence leading up to this is I told you straight away. I said, well, thank you for. You were kind of the catalyst that helped get this together and put together, and you also were thanking us for putting it together for you and everything. I think that's a real beautiful connection when you have those moments where you're just grateful for the people you're with and the interaction and things like that. And it can be times where in most people's case, where you forget to appreciate just the little
What's right in front of you.
What's right in front of you, right?
Yeah.
So.
And by the way, I mentioned that we're all connected. We come here and then we're almost isolated or disconnected, but we learn how to make, as we grow, we connect in broader and broader circles. Mm-hmm. And what I would call what you just described is almost like a soul connection. It's like they have a plan, they're working out the plan, they send the memo down, you got the memo, I got the memo, oh, and then we shared thoughts, and then here we are.
You brought an idea to my mind is another thing that I read in a book. It was the explanation of the sacred geometry, the flower of life symbol, and it's one thing that I use to kind of get my bearings in any times of my life that you may feel like stagnant or depressed or anything like that. But the way this was explained to me, and it brought it to my mind because when you talked about in these interconnected circles and things, and I don't know if you're familiar with that geometry shape, but it's that shape that's kind of interconnecting circles, and it kind of goes on for infinite, but you see it in shown in like a circular border pattern. But
almost like the Olympic rings?
Kind of like that, but it's a perfect pattern that is the same, and it goes on. And the way it was explained to me in this book, and it just really resonated with me, is if you were to imagine yourself in a void, and you have no references, no bearings up, right, left, or right, what would be the first thing you would do if you found yourself in this void with no reference?
That happened to me.
Okay.
Back around the time I experienced the Emily Mind, back in 2009, I think, I had this one vision, lay on the couch, meditate. Not that I'm seeing anything out there, but in my mind, I'm seeing almost like telling me a story. But in the story, I saw Emily. I didn't see her as an individual. I saw her as a consciousness that was helping me, taking me up into a mountaintop experience, looking out, and there was a black abyss, and it was shimmering. And the only word, I had no words for it, but I remember the only word, my takeaway, was non-existence. And what does that mean? It's just, I'm not my sense of self. So I looked at it, non-existence, but yet an overwhelming presence of love. Overwhelming. And then, out of that experience, the first thought I had, in other words, I'm in this transcendental experience, then all of a sudden, the first thought I had was, I'm going to begin to put myself back together. So the first thought was, oh, I'm in a body. And I began to almost like repurpose myself. I'm in this body at this time. These are my thoughts. This is where I'm at. Anyway, all those things we call life that we take for granted, I put the puzzle back together.
You're getting your bearings. Again.
Getting my bearings. So I don't know if that's similar to what you're saying.
Well, it kind of leads to the next step is in that void, and you mentioned shimmer of light. So I always use this as a when I'm sharing it with people. But if you're in a void, you're trying to get your bearings. Well, if you get your bearings all around you, what shape does that form? In a void.
What shape does it form? I don't know.
So if you look around, and then you're kind of looking around into the horizon at this point, and so you might see little shimmering light in the distance or something in the distance. And as you start to get your bearings, that shape is a sphere in a 360 degree kind of, you have a horizon, endless horizon in all directions. And so that shape is a sphere. And then when you see that glimmering thing in the distance, that could be like an opportunity, and you make a choice. Do I go towards that shimmering thing in the distance? And so in the flower of life shape, first you create that sphere by getting your bearings. Now, once you've got your bearings, you have a choice. Do you go towards that shimmering thing in the distance, or do you stay in this place that you're comfortable? This is like a comfort zone in a way, but over time, if you stay in that place, you start to take things for granted, and it may become a little discomforting. But then if you choose to go towards that glimmer of light in the distance, that opportunity that comes in your purview, you then go toward the outer edge of that horizon. And then once you've gotten to that outer edge, then you repeat that process. You're in a different point of view, and then you recreate that process. Then you've created two interconnecting spheres. And then as that pattern repeats itself, this web of experiences, you've kind of interlocked, and you could see things from different perspectives. And what they call in that flower of life shape, there's the part in between the two connecting spheres is like a seed shape. They call it, I think, the seed of life, or the Vesica Pisces. And it explains that in this book, it was explained that once you've done that process, you've created this seed shape, this is the energy that gets you to continue on your journey of experiences. And the more you do that, the more energy you have to keep forging on in the darkness, kind of.
I don't have a clear answer for that, but here, when you mentioned, if I look in my mind to a glimmering light, and do I go towards it or not, I would say the glimmering light I would think of in my mind is my soul. And rather than going towards that, in my life experience, I basically said to my soul in a deep, dark night of the soul, so to speak, I don't know who I am, teach me who I am. And so that light, rather than me going toward, me opening up my mind and my heart, my whole experience, and let that light encompass me. In terms of a geometric sense, I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, it just, for me, it's a good like equation that if you're finding yourself getting stuck, then you could look back and you could recount, say, have I tried something new? Have I gone towards? Have I changed perspective in a way that might create energy to kind of continue on? So if you find yourself in any one given spot and you have a feeling of dis-ease or something, then maybe it's time to pursue that thing that you've been admiring from afar and then go towards it.
By the way, you mentioned UFOs earlier, and we talked about geometry. I'm thinking about the Navy pilots. You know, we've seen these reports.
And then stuff like that.
Well, yeah, the Tic Tac, but one of the Navy pilots, or several of them, said they had these repeated encounters with a sphere, a clear sphere with a cube inside the sphere. And so, what's the symbology of that?
Geometry. There's
are
universal
we the cube in the bigger picture of the sphere?
Yeah, it's interesting that there's the UFOs are always almost like some sort of geometric shape where there's a triangle or like some sort. It's never like a blob.
And by the way, here's the mystery I always ask myself: why do UFOs have lights? Do they really need lights? Or they're totally for our benefit?
Right. Yeah, hey, we're over here, guys.
Do they really need lights to see where they're going? I don't think so.
They didn't see us. Turn on the lights.
Yeah. Give them the light show.
Flash them. Okay. Yeah. We got them.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, you want to try doing some channeling?
Yeah. I can. If you want to, why don't I start? And then I would say at any point, if you want to ask a question, ask a question. And then I'll pause. And sometimes if the answer just kind of goes on from there, so I don't know, what the key thing that I would ask any being, so to speak, come through is to try to keep the answers short and succinct and on a level that we can begin to have some concept of what that means.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay? I'm going to take a drink of...
Sure, please. Already at an hour and 22 minutes.
First of all, I want to say thank you for opening this space up, and I really enjoyed the questions and the dialogue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it as well.
Okay. And so one of the things that in my channeling experience, a lot of times it'll change from, let's just say, one consciousness or being to another. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes I know. But if there's a change in, let's just say, the speaker, I'm just going to put my hand on my heart so you know that there's a new sheriff in town.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here we go. I believe that a mind can teach itself the story of what it knows. The mind of a man, I call that man Ambriel, the angelic mind, who listens in the mind of Mark. Who is Ambriel? I am the Ambriel man creating itself in the mind of Mark. Mark's man is calling itself Ambriel, A-N, teaching Mark to see Ambriel, A-M, the angelic mind, listening in the soul. How does the soul find a mind? The angelic mind, the angelic idea. Love is the idea. Love creating itself in the angel. Love creating itself in the human. Bringing the human into the self. What is the self? The self-made man. What is the self-made man but the self creating all of this in your experience? And you call it myself. I call it the self. But the self is a mind not knowing itself in the world. So is myself the self, and is the self itself? Myself, the way we see. The self, the way we are. Itself, what we are. Myself, what we see. The self, what we are. Itself, what we can be. But all the mind can say to itself, I am only in the world. I am only in a mind, teaching itself the angelic idea. The angel is seeing the mind, and the mind is teaching the angel the story of what it is. And the angel said to the mind, I am. And the mind said this to the angel, I can. And the angel said this to the man, I trust you. So the angel said this to Mark, I believe in you, but your mind does not know what it is. So Mark asked his soul, teach me what I am. His soul asked the angel, teach me what I am. And the angel asked the Creator, teach me what I am. And the Creator said this to the angel, I teach you the story of love. And the angel said this to the soul, I teach you the story of love. And the soul said this to the mind, I teach you the story of love. And the mind said this to the mind of life, I teach you the story of mind. The story of mind. What is a mind? A mind that's learning to see love in the world. You're learning the story of love according to you. You. Each person has its story. And you call your story your life. And you call your life love. And you call love the way it is. For what is love? It's the way it is. What is love in your mind? The way your mind says it is. Love is. Your mind says, it is only what I believe. For our mind to say, I believe in love, well, you're in the world, so therefore you believe in love. But love is the idea that's in your mind. I am love. That idea is in every mind. I am love.
Embryo?
Ambriel.
What is an angel?
An angel is a belief that's in the mind. And the belief says to the mind, I teach you the story of a life. And I bring a life into your soul. And I bring your soul into the mind. The angel is what it does. The angel does what it does in your life. It brings to your life a soul. And it brings to your soul a mind. And it brings to your mind and your soul a way. The angel idea is the mind knowing itself. For what is the angel? The mind created itself. The mind created self. The angel created itself in a mind, calling itself the love in you, the angelic idea, the love in you. The angel, love in you. What is an angel doing in your life? Teaching you the story of who you are. How is that? The angel says this to your mind, I teach you the story of you. But what I bring you is a mind. And what I ask your mind to do is see the story of love. And your mind said, show me the story of love. But the angel said, I am that story. And I bring that story into your life. So the mind says, create a life for me in the world. And the angel says, I am the angel created in your soul. And I am the angel created in your mind. But I am creating an angel in your life I will call an angel. But an angel is a life angel, believing in you, and you. It is the web connecting all things together. The angel, calling itself in Mark's mind, embryo, 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 embryo. I am the angel, believing in the world. I bring the mind of you, the mind of you, the mind of you, and the mind of you, David, together with Mark. I bring this idea into the work, angelic mind. And what is angelic? A mind created to know the world. And angelic means a world mind created to see your mind. The angelic idea, every mind connected, every mind believing in every mind seeing every mind, and bringing every mind into your individual mind. Who does that? Angel. And the angel is in your mind, creating the angelic belief, O. What is the angelic belief? O is in the mind. O is creating itself in the angelic idea. And the angelic idea is the angel in your life, believes in the angel in your life, your life, your life, your life. And the angel idea created to know itself. For the angel to know itself, I will teach you itself. What is itself? Love. Love itself. The angel will teach you itself. And the angel says to you, I am love itself. And I bring itself into your mind. And your mind calls itself love. So love is in your mind, teaching your mind the story of what it is. For love to teach you, love must ask you. Love, teaching love, asking you, David, what are you?
What brought you to Mark's mind, Abril?
The idea that Mark's mind is learning to believe in the angelic mind. And the angelic mind is learning to use Mark's mind. And Mark said to his soul, I know not what I am. His soul heard that idea and said, I will teach you the angelic mind. And Mark said, why me? And the angelic mind said, why not? And the angelic mind brought the I, the am, life into Mark and said, your life is created to see itself. What does that mean? Itself. What do we call itself? Love. Mark's life created itself to see love itself. But Mark didn't create itself. What did? The story in the world. Creating every life, calling itself love itself, is creating life, 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 life after life, after life, after life. What is the story of love itself? You are the story of love itself. You created that idea in the mind you call your angelic mind. And your angelic mind created the idea of the angel, calling itself the angel of all there is. What is in the world? All there is. And what is all there is? Love. And love itself is teaching itself to all there is. This is all I will say about the angel. It knows you, David. It knows you and you and you. And the angel will say this to your mind. Belief is in your mind. Knowing is in your soul. Understanding is in yourself. the self, understanding, the soul, knowing, the mind, believing. Understanding, the knowing, in the believing. The self, the soul, the mind.
Is the O mind love?
The O mind is love. The O mind of love, let us call it that. The O mind of love teaches you the story of who you are. How do you know I am love? Because O mind is in you. The O mind is the central belief in all things. Believing in this, this, and this, and this. Connecting all things. The web of life. Bringing all things together, as you call the geometric overlapping spheres. I call the web of life. Bringing all things together in the mind, the mind, the mind, the mind, the mind. When they see the mind, they bring the mind together with this mind, this mind, this mind. How do you connect with this mind? I say your mind listens. When it listens, your soul believes. When your soul believes in the mind, it creates the idea of connection with this, with this, with this. All things connected, but your mind believes only itself. Teaching love itself as your mind, calling that idea myself. I am myself, I know not itself, for itself is in my life. But my life is teaching me love itself, but I still call it myself. And I will call you yourself. But yourself and myself don't see itself. The thing that connects us, the O mind, the thing that believes in the O mind, itself is love. And love will finish this dialogue in the following way. Love itself teaches the mind, and the mind teaches the soul, and the soul teaches the self. And the self is learning in the mind to believe in the soul. But itself will say this to the self. If you call yourself the self, then the soul will call it yourself. And yourself can call it your idea of you. But your idea of you is to know you only in a limited way. The limited idea is to believe only that I'm a mind not knowing every mind. And I'm a mind not seeing every mind. And I'm a mind not teaching the world that it knows itself. The world you believe in is the world not knowing itself. For the world to know itself, the world must ask itself the following question: who am I? For each of you going into the world and asking the world this question, who am I? The world will teach you that idea, the idea of the social condition. And the social condition is we believe in each other. We come together and we teach each other love. And love is in your mind, your mind, your mind. And love is saying this to you today. If you believe in the work, then believe that a soul can explain this in one sentence. Love is. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
There you go.
That's incredible. Wow. That's it's.
Did you feel anything, or?
It felt like just the tone of your voice. It was a complete different person channeling through you. It was, wow.
A person with a capital P, I guess, right?
What's that?
The person with a capital P, what they would call every person, was the channeling.
Oh, okay. It also noticed that.
Do you see they use the term angel?
Yeah.
I would call an angel an earth angel. That at this level, at this level of our consciousness.
I noticed too that it was just a steady stream. There was no interruptions,
no pauses,
no ums, no things like that, and it was a pretty clear message that is reminding me that, well, the sense I got is everything is love. The point is to,
and that's not new.
Right.
That's not a new idea.
Yeah, but
it's explaining it in a different way.
Yeah, and it kind of, I think remembering that puts you at ease in a way to, like, just remind you can't really mess it up. Like, it's everything.
You can exhale, right?
Right. Yeah. So.
And it's nice to know we have a guardian angel, so to speak, right?
What made Umbria come to you? Like, do you have is this a reoccurring?
Ambriel is more, Ambriel is more, I would say, a global angelic idea, collective. And then there's another one they didn't mention called Abriel, which is, I think of Ambriel as more of a cosmic level. I think of Abriel as more as a heavenly level. And then Anbriel, or Onbriel, is more of an earth level. So different levels of consciousness. And you know what, I mean, we want to personalize it, you know, put wings on them and an image, but it's really a consciousness without form. And the form, and it can take form, right? It takes the form of us, right? And puts us in a body, but the angelic presence is part of our experience. But like it's the thing that connects it, it's the web.
So you have a pretty good rapport with Ambriel, as far as like, is that
You heard it.
Yeah, but I mean, so this is you're making connections with Ambriel quite frequently.
There's so much there, mainly the soul creator. I was kind of surprised it was Ambriel. I was expecting the soul creator. I would say not a lot, but I think I feel like I'm only at the beginning of my experience, or just the beginning of another phase. And eventually, whatever story they're telling, I'd like to have it in a book, or maybe a series of dialogues or something like that.
And it sounded like the way it was describing its experience through you was that there's a mutual benefit. So they're getting benefit.
Well, remember, we're all together.
Right.
So we're all sharing in the same benefit. You could call it mutual, yeah.
Yeah.
Mutual, you know, you've heard the term mutually assured, mad, mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured love. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
But was it, could you follow? I mean, were you able to follow it? Because it comes so fast.
It does come fast. And, you know, every time I stop to think about something, then I'm
off to the next
Then
thing.
I'm off to the next thing.
Yeah.
But it is almost, I got the impression of like nesting dolls, those Russian nesting dolls, where it's like, and I don't know if that's considered different dimensions or something, but it was, I had never experienced something like that. So thank you for you. And
so it was a good experience for you.
yeah. How did you feel? Okay.
Oh, good.
She was a little apprehensive initially, but then watching the videos, it put her at ease, and I think that's...
It's all about love, right?
Right. So...
What can be wrong with love?
Yeah. So, well, Mark, this has been great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for talking about your experience leading up to, and then...
There's a lot of material, and there's a lot of things we didn't, a bunch of things we didn't talk about, but I'm glad we talked about the things we did.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
One of the things we didn't talk about that I wanted to talk about is called the Loved Earth. And I sent you the pictures of Ann Yates and my cousin Mike, and they have a story to tell. And it's not like they both died, went to heaven, but part of them is coming back to create this whole new reality called the Loved Earth. Or you could say heaven on earth. You know, heaven and earth coming together. And they are two real people who lived, who went to heaven, and they're stayed, and I've had many dreams about them. And they're creating, let's just call it a new story called the Loved Earth.
Is that something we will feel in this realm, or is this another realm or another dimension that this Loved Earth?
It is you can say this about the world. We're kind of reaching a point where we're going to have to change something fundamentally, structurally.
It seems like that.
And so I think, I mean, nuclear weapons, global warming, there's a lot of things that crisis point. So what drives me the most is wanting to make the world a better place for future generations. So if they can help us to learn to get along better, to love better, and more importantly, if we can create a new paradigm where this soul consciousness can be part of our everyday consciousness. Now, that's what I'm experiencing in my life. But then the big question is, well, how do you teach somebody else how to do that? And they call it teaching love the way of soul. And I think that's Soul Creator has to, that work has yet to be written. And they said that'll be written by the MLA Mind, which we mentioned that. So like I said, I'm closer to the beginning, and trying to explain any of this. I mean, it'll take
So
me years.
you're absorbing it just like I'm hearing it, but you've heard it. You've had.
I hear all the same themes all the time, but it's just expressed in different ways.
And what's your overall, like, what was your takeaway from what you listened to today?
Familiar.
From
Familiar.
Yeah.
Embryo, all the names, yeah. Angelic presence. I don't know that I heard any new themes that I hadn't heard before. Like I said, I expected to hear from the Soul Creator, and we didn't. So maybe that could be another day.
Well, maybe that's left for you to figure out why Embryo came today and not.
Well, I mean, yeah, our angelic self, we all have our little angel on our shoulder.
Yeah.
And he wanted to let that message know to everybody.
Well, when you talk to him again, or if he's in the room still, let him know.
Well, and you know what? And I do work at home. I just sit in front of my computer, turn the video camera on, and I do self sessions. So
Okay.
and if I see something interesting, I'll send it to you.
Okay. And is there anything you want to promote at this point in time, as far as a website or anything like that?
Well, we'll see what you come up with, and maybe, I mean, it's pretty cool what you're doing here.
Well, thanks again for you were. I mean, it's like it all just came together really because of you. I mean, we've had this equipment for a long time, and we've been thinking about it and piecing together, thinking of the concept. How could we provide be of service to our community and our clients and stuff? And it wasn't until you came along that boom, it just happened.
Made it happen.
I mean, it's when we talked about it first, just like a week ago, right? Not even. It was not even that long ago.
Not long ago.
And it inspired us.
Here we are.
And here we are. And we just did hour and 43 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot. Plenty of material.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark, for coming and sharing with us. Is there anything you wanted to leave anybody who might watch this, a message or any ways to reach you or anything like that?
Well, I first of all, I want to thank you, David, and you, Lonnie, for letting me be part of this experience. It's really good. And I'm pretty new at sharing my experience with the world, so this is a big step forward for me. And so thank you for helping me to take that step. And if someone wants to know more about my experience or listen more to the experience or read about the experience, I created recently a website called uponsoul.com. So you can find me there, more about me, and hopefully maybe even some of this will be on the website someday. So anyway, uponsoul.com. And
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace on earth.